Hello and welcome to part 3. In this tutorial I'm going to walk you through setting up the tracks. In this case we're going to set up the spline track version. Maybe in the future I will also show you the other way of setting up a track with a skinned version. I'm not going to show you this from beginning to end, I'm just going to show you the concept because maybe this is going to change in the future because it's currently a pretty tedious process. Let's get to it. This is where we left off in the last video. Your wheels and your suspension should work. So now what we have to do is set up the track. So I'll go into the blueprint. First I'm going to explain what you should do. Let me unhide. I'll do the right track. Unhide the track links. I will show you the spline. So this is the track spline. I'll show you this from the side. Now one thing you should know is the spline consists of spline points, of course, and that there is a beginning and an end somewhere. Now, to figure out where the start and the end is, when you have the spline selected, you can turn off the closed loop so you can see where the spline ends or starts. Now I know that the spline starts here, so just bear with me. One other thing you should know is that all of these spline points along the spline are numbered. Currently this is the track from the M113. It has a total of 15 spline points, and the first spline point is this one, and then it goes clockwise, and then this is the last one. You can find the spline coordinates in the base over here when you have the blueprint selected. Here on the right side, what you see here is the spline coordinates for the right side and the spline coordinates for the left side. Now you have to manually adjust these coordinates to make them fit. If there's anybody who knows a different way of modifying a spline, please let me know, because currently this is a pretty tedious process. So first what you have to do, I go to the spline, is grab a piece of paper and a pen, and just draw your track, because you have to write down the coordinates of these points. At least that's going to make it easier and faster for you to fill them in. Okay, currently when you look at the spline, you can see 5 spline points at the bottom. Now these spline points need to correspond with the place where the wheel touches the track. Now this track is of course from the M113, and that one has 5 road wheels, and in this example the CV90 has 7, so we need to add an extra 2, and we need to move these to the sprocket of the CV90, and we have to fiddle around with the other splines to get them in the right position. So one easy trick I learned from BoredEngineer to get these coordinates is just add an object to your blueprint. It doesn't really matter what it is. In this case I think I'm going to go with maybe a cube. I'm going into wireframe mode, zoom in, and now when I move the cube around, change the snapping to 1. What you can do now is you can move the cube around to the position where the point needs to be, and then when you look on the right, you just write down the X and the Z direction, or the Z value for that point. And a smart thing to do is to just draw the spline on a piece of paper and then put numbers around the spline, starting from 0, that's the first point of the spline, and then going clockwise, and you're just counting 0, 1, 2. In this case this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but since we need to add 2, the number 3 is going to be here. So just draw a spline, start with 0 over here, and you just go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. You also need a spline point at the opposite direction of where the wheel hits the track above here. I wrote them down in advance, so I don't have to do that right now because that's obviously taking a little bit of time. So the next step is to modify the spline and add the spline points. For that you just go into the blueprint itself, then in the right panel you look up the spline coordinates for the right side in this case. I'm going over to a lit version to make it easier to see. And then the first thing I will do is modify the first 3 points to match them up with the sprockets. So I wrote down the coordinates. So in this case, for me that is 366. There we go. As you can see, the points line up with the sprocket now. Now I need to add these 2 points, and the way you do that is when you go into your spline coordinates over here, you have to add elements, but don't do it right here because it will just add them at the end here. The easiest thing to do is when you count, this is 0, 1, 2, and then 3 should be here, but 3 is now over there, so you need to add one in between. So then what you do is you go to the third one and hit insert. Then it'll place a new one in between the second and the other third. Now I just have to fill in the coordinates that I wrote down. 276, it's like 109, and that was 5. Here we go. And as you can see, I now added an extra spline point in there. Go back to the spline itself to make it a little bit easier to see. This is the point I added. Just to make it clear, I will show you another one. Go back here, go back to your spline coordinates. Then I need to add one in between. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3. And then that should be 4. So what I will do is I'm going to insert another one over here. And then just fill in the coordinates again. That's it. Let me select the spline to show you. Now as you can see, I now have added the 2 spline points for the front wheels. Now don't get scared because you get these weird tangent problems. The reason for that is because when I go back to my spline over here, you see these spline coordinates consist of 17 elements, every spline point also needs tangent information, and currently it's reading the tangent information from this array called spline tangents, and this one has only 15 elements, so it's missing a couple of spline tangents, but we will fix that at the end. So I will just go over the rest of the points. I'm going to pause the video and then continue when I'm done placing the rest of the points, and then I'll continue from there. Okay, now as you can see, I finished adding all the splines and putting them in the right spot. Won't be needing the cube anymore. Now all we have to do is fix the tangents. So how you're going to do that is just select the blueprint itself again, and then use on the right scroll down to the spline tangent array. And now as you can see, our spline for the right side now has 19 elements. That tangent array also needs 19 elements. So what you do is just add tangent information at the same location where you inserted the extra 2 wheels. In my case that was between the second and the third, because the third was over here in the beginning and the second was over here. So you can just do that by going to this third one and then just insert one and insert another one. Now it added 2 tangents for these 2 points, and you need 2 tangents for the top ones as well, and I added them at the end. So all I have to do now is just add these elements to the end of the list. Here we go. Now you can tweak the tangents of the spline. I'll show you that for this wheel. That is number 3. When you go to the X value here, you hold down the mouse button, you scroll them to the left and the right. Sorry, it's calculating. I'll just fill in the value. In my case that's minus 74.5, and then as you can see, the tangent is being modified for the spline. Now if you want, you can do that for cosmetic reasons, of course. I will do this one as well. Just have to count which one that is. That is number 10. Let me look in my list what I did for number 10. Put that one to minus 10. And I've put 11 to 20. And I've got this one to like 90. It's fair enough for this example. So basically that's how you set up the spline for the track. This part is done, and the next thing to do is make sure that when you're driving around and the suspension goes up and down, that it also moves that spline point up and down. So the way you do that is you go over to functions here on the left side, and there's a function here that's called animate thread spline. You just open that up. I've got it open over here, and we need to modify a couple of things here. First of all, when you look at this function, it's reading the translation values of the wheels. and since I copied the M113 example, I still only have 5 wheels here, so we have to add the other wheels in order to hook them up with the spline. So let me do that first. Move this up to make a little bit of space. I am going to disconnect this one, select the last two, just copy and paste them, put them under here. I will connect them. Now these two have to go because we need the other wheel meshes that we added. That is wheel number 6 and number 7. Here we go. So connect that to the wheel mesh component, and this one to this wheel mesh component. Now you have to connect the spline coordinates. Zoom in, just go down. Here we go. And the final thing you have to hook up is the suspension information. It's number 6, suspension setup, and number 7, suspension setup. Now what you have to do is, when you look at this animate thread spline control point function, you see here a bottom CP index and a top CP index, and it's looking at wheel number 1. So what you need to specify in these functions is, when I go back to the viewport, when you look at the spline, I'll select the spline. This is wheel number 1 and this is the spline, and when you count the spline points that you wrote down, starting from 0, this is 0, 1, 2, and this is spline point number 3, and this spline point on top of the wheel, that is the final spline point, and in this case that is number 18. So what you have to do on your piece of paper is write those points down. The bottom point in this case is number 3 and the top spline point is number 18. For wheel number 2, that will be number 4 for the bottom and number 17 for the top. Then you go back to your animate thread spline function and then you just fill these in. For wheel number 1, I said number 3 bottom and 18 for the top. For wheel number 2, that's number 4 and then 17. For wheel number 3, that's going to be 5 and then 16, etc. So as you can see, I've filled all of these spline points in. So now it knows that when wheel number 7 goes up and down, it uses the translation values in Z to also move the control points on the spline for the appropriate wheel. I just compile and save these. Oh, I don't need to turn that one off. Now we set up the spline, set up the spline points, and we hook them up to the suspension, so basically it should work. There's one more thing I can do right now before checking if it all works. As you can see, in this example I used the track links from the M113 just to show. You see that the spacing is incorrect because of course the spline now is longer than the track of the M113, so all you have to do is just go back to the blueprint, and then when you scroll down, we close the spline coordinates, you go here and then there's a variable here called threads on side. That's the number of track links it's going to place along the spline. So just have to increase that one. In my case that's, I believe, around 85. Yeah. So now it places 85 track links along the spline when you're driving. Now just compile and save. Go back to your scene, and then when I look at the other side, now you see that the track is there. Let's see if it works. Hit play. Yeah, sorry about the sound. Let's go to, I believe number 3 is this. Yeah. Now when you move forward, you see that the tracks are moving. Now as you can see, you still have to modify a couple of settings for the spline tangents probably, or the thickness of the collision wheel, to make sure that the tracks are not going through the floor. Just let's check out if it works. Go over here. There's something wrong with these. Let me see if I can figure out what the problem is. I think I know what the problem is. When I go back to the animate thread spline function, what I did is copy these last two to the bottom here, so probably there's something wrong with the bottom spline. Let me see, that's wheel number 4 and 5 is okay, and then as you can see, these are the same as these. I have to change these. For wheel number 6, this needs to be 8. For wheel number 7, this needs to be 9. Let's compile, save, go back to the scene again, hit play, cover your ears. Oh my god, turn it off next time. So now when you drive around, the track should move up and down with the suspension. Still not doing that. Thing I forgot to connect when you go back to the animate thread spline function is this one, the thread spline array. So just connect this one to the last two, 6, connect that here, and do that again for the last one. There we go. Compile. Cover your ears again. And now it should work. Now as you can see, the track moves with the appropriate wheels. So that's it. As you can see, setting up the track splines currently is a pretty tedious process, although when you know how to do it, it's actually pretty fast. So, and you only have to do that once. So I don't really know if it's going to change in the future. So that covers the entire setup for a tracked vehicle with BoredEngineer's blueprints. If you have any questions or you want me to show a specific part in a little more detail, just let me know, then I'll record a video for that. Thanks for watching.